Hi, Jillian. Thank you for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And yeah, if you could just give the audience a bit of your background, who you are, what you've done. And I think you've had a very interesting and eclectic background in the space.
It is true. It is true. Mind you, I think there are a lot of people with interesting backgrounds in this space,
It's true.
especially the early people who come in, maybe later on when we get the mass adoption. We just have ordinary folk coming in. I'm not saying that I'm not ordinary. Of course I'm ordinary. But my path, I think people's paths are they're a bit like the price. They're like up and down all over the place. So
Very true.
I would call myself journalist and broadcaster and author. And I want to go with the author bit actually at the end. But I've been in fintech all my life, pretty much. And my first job was at JP Morgan. I left Trinity College in Dublin, and I was hard on the milk around to work for JP Morgan as a systems analyst. But that was so much in the dark ages. I didn't have a computer because I did honours Irish, and you had to choose between honours Irish and computer studies in my school. And so when I joined them as a systems analyst, a programmer, I didn't know what a computer was. When I did my thesis in college, I hand wrote my thesis out and I gave it to someone to type it up, on a typewriter. It was just, that's actually why I'm so noisy on my keyboard, because I didn't learn to type properly. I do that hunt and peck thing, but because I was using like a typewriter, you really got to push those things in,
Yeah.
So my kids laughing when I'm on they're like, well, what are you doing? Bang, going, was that not how you do it? So that was back in the dark ages, and then I lived all over the world in fintech, PR, marketing, and then came back to Ireland and bought a big house and lived happily ever after.
Wow.
Nice
story.
No, I didn't. That was the plan. I hit divorce and recession in 2008 and 2009, and it was just crazy. And I always say, if you want to get divorced, don't do it in a recession, because it absolutely kills everything. It really is not good. And my ex went back to the UK, became bankrupt, and gave me all the debt as my divorce present to myself and our two girls. And they're kind of going, oh my God, my business is collapsing, everything's collapsing, really crazy. And then the price of the house was collapsed. It was a big manor house, but went from 1.1 million, and it was, oh my God, it was doing a downward spiral. And I tried to get a buyer, someone to buy it, because I just needed to get rid of it at this stage.
Yeah.
And I did a little video, and I know this, you might be going, yes. But remember, I learned to program before computers were almost invented, right? Or certainly PCs and laptops. And when I made this video to sell my house, it's very commonplace now, but it wasn't then. And because I was a bit quirky and the video went viral, it was mad. And all of a sudden I was being featured in New York Times and the Telegraph, and I was on news talk, I was on television programs, because I kind of epitomized what was happening to Ireland, because we had the crash before, we had the Celtic Tiger, before the crash. So it was very painful in Ireland, because you go from like the country going up in prosperity to
Yeah, I remember that prior to it, like Ireland was building like crazy. I mean, I was quite young at the time, but I do remember that like it was one of the first ones before the sort of like the precursor to the entire global kind of collapse of the housing market.
Yeah, no, it was, and now we have a huge housing crisis, but we have enough houses here. Anyway, that's another story. But it was kind of crazy, and I went viral, and all of a sudden I epitomized what was happening in Ireland at that stage, because I wasn't like, I was a self-employed mum with two small children. So I wasn't like a developer or a part. I was just an average working woman, but everything was sort of going belly up in my world. So they kind of put me on all programs. I was on news talk, and I was on Al Jazeera Today. It was Russia Today, Al Jazeera. It was just crazy the amount of, they made documentaries about me. That's how mad it was.
So
it was an RT did, but a Belgian TV and a German TV company came over and did a documentary, which I was a central person, just weird stuff. And anyway, I got a cash offer on the house, but the banks refused consent for me to sell the house. They preferred to repossess it, which plunged me into bankruptcy because I still owed the money. But by then, I'm a raging activist at this stage. So I've done so much like on television and radio and on papers and stuff. And I realized also the injustice of what was happening to ordinary folk, because ordinary folk were failing financially, but somehow they're being shamed. And so a lot of men in particular were taking their own lives because they couldn't cope with it. Because people were saying, oh, you're gaming the system. They just failed financially. That's all it was. Maybe it was divorce, maybe it's ill health, maybe job loss, maybe it's the overall recession. So I got really, really angry. And I discovered, I was the first female bankrupt under the new laws in Ireland. And I discovered that as a bankrupt, I wasn't allowed to run for public office. And that was because we inherited arcane UK laws, where the whole notion of, being able to vote and being respectable, you have to be a man of property. It kind of came from that era. So it's still on your statute books, by the way. If you're bankrupt, you can't be a public officer. You can't run for the Houses of Parliament. You just can't do it.
Really?
Not allowed. And if you wear a Jeffrey Archer, Jeffrey Archer was exited from his place when he was forced into bankruptcy. He had to resign his house, and it was a House of Lords, I think, where he had a seat because you're not allowed to do the two of them. So it's crazy. It's old-fashioned law because failing financially, that's all it is. It doesn't say that you've killed or murdered or stolen to get to that point.
Yeah.
So anyway, I brought the Irish government to the High Court, and I said my constitutional rights were being infringed because I wasn't allowed to run for public office as a bankrupt. And of course they changed the law because it actually makes no sense in this modern world. And it was quite exciting. Not many people do change the law. So I changed the law. And then the next elections that came up were the 2014 European parliamentary elections. So I ran in that as an independent. And I used like PR. You know, I had no money. I was on the dole. I had my car was bust. A friend lent me his late mother's little Fiat, whatever. And I had nothing. But it was a very exhilarating campaign because I felt I had agency again. Do you know what I mean? Because all these things that happened to me just were crazy. This is mad. And I got 11,500 votes, which I topped the independent tallies, which I was very happy about. And like I said, it gave me agency, it gave me control of my life. Not enough to get elected, thank goodness, because I wouldn't want to be a politician. But anyway, I went back to my normal life. And I thought, that's it. That's my life over. That's it. And then a couple of years later, I met blockchain and Bitcoin. I went, oh. So that's my entry. You always talk about weird stories. That's my entry because like I'd heard about Bitcoin before, but it went over my head because I had a nice, comfortable life. Why did I need to know about this magic money? And it didn't make any sense to me because I hadn't lived in a world where everything was torn away from me. And you kind of go, why is this happening? How is this happening? I mean, what is money? I mean, how often when you have a nice, almost like suburban life, you know, just you don't think about these things.
No.
And you have to be, I mean, perhaps people do now, more days now. But until this happened to me, it never occurred to me to question what was money. And when having gone through that very painful process, when I learned about blockchain the second time around, I went, So I jumped in with my 2 feet, and I'll stop talking now because I've been monologuing here, into this space. I'm a journalist and I chair conferences, go all around the world, chair conferences, speak, do moderations. And also as a journalist, what I love doing as well, I get to interview people. So I've interviewed, some of the big names in this space, and I keep on trying to get them. I interviewed Stani from Ave just recently. That was lovely. I've been chasing him for a bit. I've met him over the years. And then Charles Hoskinson, I interviewed him recently as well. Big fan of him. And I've also interviewed John McAfee and Alex Mashinsky, some of the more bigger characters. So it's been a great journey.
That's amazing. And yeah, obviously, like John McAfee, God rest his soul, like he was definitely a character in the space. He was big. It was some of the things he would do would be a little bit questionable, but it was funny because he also did it with a smile on his face. He never.
Well, he did some very strange stuff according to that film in his life and stuff. But
yeah, I know.
I think he did, even though he was a larger than life character, he did most of what he did was stuff that I saw with integrity. Do you know what I mean? He would shill projects, but he shilled projects because he said they made sense. They made the world a better place. So he was shilling things that he thought actually made sense. So that kind of his moral compass was someplace there, but it was there. It was true for him. And I know in my interview we spoke mostly about poetry.
Wow.
Like, yeah, he recited some of his favorite poems to me. It was just kind of like, yeah, it was interesting. I didn't expect that.
No, neither would I, to be fair. That's very fascinating. And but yeah, I think it's unfair when a documentary is made about somebody when they're not there to defend themselves, right? Like, yeah. But
I think I actually I just read about it. I think it's probably very clickbaity. I read the synopsis of it and stuff like that. But no, you're right. When you're dead, who's going to defend you?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Sometimes you have your family or those closest to you, but in this instance, I don't think he had a lot of people that were there to defend him. But he was. I never actually met him, but he was at a lot of conferences that I was at as well. As he was. He basically never missed a conference in the crypto space, did he? Any big ones? I mean, like obviously there was tons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was just. Well, I think that's the other nice thing about people who are watching this, who are thinking, what is crypto? What is blockchain? Go to the conferences. Go to the meetups. Conferences can be expensive. Go to the side events because you meet. I said at the start, I hadn't really thought about what money is, or didn't really register with me. It's just something you earned and you lived off, whatever. But it's if you're interested, go along and just meet people because the people are endlessly fascinating in this space, and I think you can learn a lot. Again, it could be a meetup. Conferences are expensive. Could be a side event. It could be, we were talking earlier about London and the crypto curry clubs and the crypto poker nights, and there's a lot of meetups that happen. And just go and find out and meet people. Find your tribe.
It's a good message just in general, but especially if you want to kind of learn about the crypto space and stuff. What do you think about, because obviously from what you've told me, it sounds like you've been in around like since 2017, 18-ish time.
Yeah.
So, quite now relatively a veteran, I'd say, in the space. And what do you think about the different cycles we've had? Because I'd say we had a big bull run then, roughly. Then we had one just during the pandemic. And I guess we're kind of going into one now in terms of Bitcoin. Absolutely, it's a huge rally. But I feel like, I think everyone feels like not everything has really picked up as you would expect. So, but what do you personally think is different, or do you think it's just a timing thing? Do you think it's different this time around, or do you think it's a timing thing? What are your thoughts?
It's a good question. I have to say, when I entered the space, I entered it very broke, so I wasn't an early buyer of Bitcoin then. But for me, how the cycles impact me, because I get more work when things are very buoyant. I get more work, and that's important for me. In terms of the cycle, I've been kind of holding my breath, because I thought the halvening last year, was it last year or the year before now? I can't remember.
Last year.
Last year, was it? We thought that would do it, didn't do it. ETFs, that didn't do it. Institutional money, that didn't do it. So even though Bitcoin is obviously at a huge price now, what is it, $108 at the moment, I think?
Yeah, I think
around
708, yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of around at that point. It doesn't feel as though we're in a bull run. No. And also, I'm not a trader, I'm not an investor, so it only impacts me that if everything is buoyant, there's more work for me. And I get invited to go to conferences, and it's lovely working in a time of, of buoyancy. But I don't feel it's like that. The 2017, that run was massive. There was a full feeling, and I don't think this time around it doesn't feel the same. And I don't know why. Because some of the markers are certainly there, and the altcoins are buzzing as well. So I don't know.
It's true.
Well, how do you feel?
Well, no. I think it's very similar. I think like you said, the 2017 bull run was like very, very frothy. Everything was going. Yes. Everything was investing into everything, and you basically couldn't miss if you threw money at most things, right? And and I think it was similar, not quite as I'd say as epic as that previous one was, just because in terms of price action, we'd already seen something big happen with it, so I guess everyone was sort of expecting it. In the, I'd say, what was it, 2021-ish? That was around the next kind of big run. But this time around, we've seen Bitcoin rally massively, but like now, I feel like I've mentioned this in 2 of my episodes so far, but I kind of still feel it's true. I don't think retail are here yet, like we have seen in the previous ones. I think that's what it is. I think retail haven't.
You could be right.
Haven't really, the whole FOMO mode hasn't kind of kicked in, which is interesting to see where Bitcoin's price is at now. Because if that's the case, then you got to be like, well, who's buying? And then you're like, okay, well, clearly big money is buying Bitcoin. So, but the question becomes, is it now that people are just a bit scared because of, let's be honest, the last few years there's been a lot of meme coin mania, and it's like, is that good or bad? Like the president of the United States had his own meme coin. I mean, okay, albeit,
I actually bought a couple.
So did I. I traded it. I arbitraged it when it first came out because it was like a big...
Well done. I bought it way too late, and it's sitting there like a quarter of its price, whatever.
If there's only a few, it's fine. And you also bought history, right? Like, that's why
I did it, because I'm not a trader, so I thought there's no way I'll get in out at the right time. So I was going to have it so I can say, yes, I bought those. So I bought 2 meme coins at the top of the market. It's kind of funny. But someone said to me as well, I was interviewing somebody, I can't remember who it was now, but they said they thought meme coins could be an entry point for retail. They said, because it's kind of fun, and I mean, forget the rugging thing, but just it's like if you have a trading sort of speculative personality, that can be quite fun too. I can trade in this and maybe make some money, or not, but maybe not lose so much, maybe, I don't know. So they said, because DeFi was supposed to be, but it's still so complicated. It's still, it's not standard. Meme coins, real world assets, that's kind of a big thing of tokenization. But that also takes a lot of explanation. So people don't really get that. They go, oh yeah, real world, yeah, what's that? And then tokenization, there's still a lot of explaining to be done. It's not, I don't know, I think, so I was at a party recently and someone said, well, you can't spend to stable coins. I said, I can. I said, I've got an app on my phone and I put some stable coins on it and I can buy pints, I can buy groceries, whatever. yeah, you can. I said, can you? I said, yeah. So that hasn't translated yet. People don't really realize, I suppose. And again, it's that funny money. So I'm still explaining to people, it's not funny money. Anyway, regular money is much more funny than crypto money.
It is. It's very true. And I mean, well, the funny, if we're talking about like stable coins, they're basically just based off of, funny money, based off of fiat. So intrinsically, they're completely tied. Well, I mean, the correct ones. We're not talking like a Terra situation here, but like, USDC and USDT to some extent are quite stable. But yeah, no, let's go back to you touching on the real world assets. I think that's or RWAs. I think it's really interesting, and maybe let's explore that a little bit. And because to people that don't really understand the benefit, I guess, is the big one, right? I think people understand, maybe they don't. Well, let's explain it. Like, obviously a real world asset, bringing it on chain is doing something like tokenizing stocks, I guess, is an example. Or
I think property is a good example. And I think I get that, because most of us in our lifetime, certainly in the Western world, will have a mortgage and buy property. So that's something you understand. We all understand that it costs a lot of money to buy property, and to invest in property is very difficult, because you either have to be an accredited investor or have enough money, basically. And then it's very liquid. You got to sit in it for a long time. It's not like you're just flipping meme coins or anything like that. And I do like the idea of tokenization of property. And I like it in the idea of like developers can crowdsource, because it's so hard. I refer back to Ireland. We're in a huge housing crisis. I think it's hard to get a house in Ireland, any other country in Europe, apart from Denmark at the moment. So we've got a huge problem. And you find that middle developers can't get access to finance, just can't get finance, which seems ridiculous. And everything's costing too much, but they can't get access to finance. So could you crowdsource that? And then people who, on the flip side, who want to invest in property, they might go, well, I've got a couple of $100 here or euros. I'll punt it in there because it's going to be property. And I think it's going to be invest. So it's quite a nice way of unlocking the liquidity in property in something you can all understand. I mean, stocks and shares, I think, are a bit more upmarket, if you like, because you normally have to have a fairly good salary and money in the bank to start thinking about stocks and shares, whereas everybody can kind of understand the concept of buying property. And I love the idea too as well. If you couldn't do more of that, then small to medium developers, certainly here, could start developing houses, which are terribly needed. So it's a social good as well as making profit. Which I think also, can I just say, do you know what I love about this space? I did the .com boom and crash and all the rest of it. And that was kind of interesting because it was innovation and rethinking the world. Like, I buy clothes online. I buy books online. Before the .com, I would have never considered doing that. And of course, we all do it now. My kids do it the whole time. But the third thing about this space is that there is a genuine push to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the three pillars of Web3. And I think that feeds into it. So some of this innovation, like with can I do good, make money, but do good, make money. I can do both. How cool is that?
Well, I think it's interesting as well because, like, in terms of like making money, you usually, I mean, depending on what, if you build out a protocol, for example, that will have these real world assets on, what we use for gas obviously is something that has value and is used. So intrinsically, it kind of will hopefully go up in value if you hold it by being a part of the ecosystem, because by owning a token, like for Ethereum, for example, owning a bit of Ethereum is you owning a bit of the ecosystem, and whether or not you stake it to then earn rewards is a whole different story. But obviously it all kind of feeds back to each other. So it's, instead of, one big company running this infrastructure, it's decentralized, that everybody has a little piece of this protocol or software, or, I mean, Ethereum is not a software, but you know what I mean? Like, it is the foundation, and that's the beauty, I think, of Web3. It took me a while to get into saying Web3 instead of crypto as well, because I just felt like it was a bit naff when it first came along.
Yeah, I feel that people hate crypto, so Web3 sounds more. But I interviewed Andreas Antonopoulos before, and he's been a bit quiet there recently, but he was Mr. Bitcoin back in the day, and he at the end of his talks would give somebody $5 worth of Bitcoin, and he encouraged other people in the crowd to help people open wallets and get their first bit of Bitcoin, because, to use an awful expression, you have to have skin in the game to understand. Once you hold something, then it makes it's a whole different kettle of fish to having a theory about it, to actually having a wallet and having some token on it, or some, maybe, like my sister who's a nurse, and she has bought some Bitcoin on her Revolut app. Now I know it's only the performance, not the actual it's not custodial, but that's kind of interesting. She wouldn't have done that before, so now before she might have said, "Oh, what's the funny money?" She goes, "Oh, my funny money's doing well." So it switches the brain around when you actually have skin in the game.
It does, and I think that's interesting. Like, I mean, obviously, I know what you mean in terms of like, not my, if it's not your own wallet, not my coins, but I am like grateful for companies like Revolut that are really trying to innovate and because they introduced it way back. I think it was around 20. I might be wrong, but I think it was around 2018, 2019. They started, having like you could buy a little bit of like coin, you could buy a little bit of Bitcoin, you could buy a little bit of this token, and so they could see, I guess, where it was heading ahead of everybody else. And I might be wrong about the timing on that, but it was a lot earlier than people realize.
Well, I didn't realize that.
And like what you need is companies like that to kind of help build out adoption, because if an organization like Revolut, who now is obviously huge, is kind of legitimizing it in one way, it just gives it that gravitas that it needs for people to kind of adopt it a lot more. And because people are still skeptical. People are still skeptical of Bitcoin. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people.
It drives me nuts. I'm kind of going, what is hard to understand, really? And have you looked at your fiat? Have you looked at what happens in other parts of the world? Bretton Woods, Nixon, the Vietnamese War. I mean, like, do we not know? I mean, like, can we not just say those things? Quantitative easing. You go, yeah, but that's the government's doing that. Yeah. But I think sometimes it goes back to what I said at the start. Sometimes you need a kick in the ass to look at things again. That's a bit of a rude expression, but my life was going along fine. I wasn't questioning things because it didn't serve me to question things. I was just doing what I was doing. And then when it all fell apart, I went, what exactly is happening here? And that I think was, but it had to happen to me to do it. I mean, I probably, if I was still married and living in the big house and doing my things, whatever, I could be here. I could be like going, oh, that's funny money stuff. Like I might have sort of jumped into it because life hadn't taught me that you might want to question what's going on. So I don't know. I was lucky I got a kick in the ass.
Yeah, it's true. And but hopefully, I think not everyone has to go through that to like understand and because I think it's yeah, I mean, it is one of those things that it feels like everyone that has in the space has had something like that, and makes them just kind of really question and then really dive into like things like quantitative easing. You're like, oh, okay, so you're just printing money, but in a different mechanism, and really realizing, hey, what is happening to the value of just keeping the money in a bank. Like what you're earning in interest is just not keeping up with real world inflation.
And the value of the dollar or the euro, the pound goes down the whole time. And that's even not a difficult. You don't be an economist to understand that. You know that a fiver 20 years ago, bought you a lot more than a fiver today. So you don't have to be an economist to almost look at what's happening. People know that. They instinctively know that, but they still don't question sometimes. And I get it too as well. So until I had all my things happen to me, I hadn't questioned. I had been at a presentation a number of years before that. I went over my head because I remember after that, darn it, because like maybe it's in 2014. Why hadn't I bought some Bitcoin then? Why hadn't I figured it out and been not excited? And I didn't. I probably would have lost it between then and now anyway. But yeah, it's funny.
It's one of those things. It's like when I first heard of Bitcoin back in 2011. And it was just because I was at my last year at uni and friends were buying drugs with it on Silk Road. So that was and I was like, well, I don't want to touch that drug money. And then, like years later, I kind of followed it a bit more and thinking 2013, 2014. I was like, oh, I've heard about this Bitcoin thing. It's not as crazy, not as bad as I thought it was. Maybe I'll try and mine it. So I got.
Were you a miner?
No. I got an old computer. This was my attempt. I got a really old computer to try and mine it. But by this stage, it just got a lot more complicated and a lot more. And basically, I think if at the time, I was like, it would mind me like 2 Bitcoin a year or something like that, or with a system. And I was just like, well, it's gonna waste so much electricity doing this. In hindsight, obviously, even doing that would have been great.
I don't know. It probably would have cost a lot in your utility bills.
Yeah, it would have, to be fair at the time. Well, because things had just got a lot more sophisticated and they were proper, like, I don't know if ASIC miners had actually been developed by that point, but I know that obviously there were more sophisticated miners, or you at least needed to kind of set up your GPUs in a certain way. And so I kind of gave up on that, and then came back to it in 2017. That's a whole other spiel and story. But yeah, it's very fascinating, the kind of journey it's happened. But I think it's also important that not everybody, because obviously in hindsight you're kind of like, oh yeah, I wish I'd bought it years ago. But I think, you know, the biggest story is always the every year, the time when it comes out, it's obviously the time it happened, is the Bitcoin pizza story, when he bought what I can't even remember. It was like
10,000
or 20. It was like thousands upon thousands of Bitcoin for 2 pizzas. And but my theory on that is, like, obviously it's quite a funny story as well. However, you know, if that never happened, could Bitcoin be where it is today? You know, you needed people to start using Bitcoin as an actual transactional medium for it to get to where it is today. And so if everyone just minded and held it, it wouldn't be where it is today, in my opinion.
Well, I think a lot of times people get confused between Western Europe and developing world. And you have, you know, if you're in Venezuela, you're going to spend your money because your local currency doesn't work, whatever. So, and that's, people don't say, oh, why would you spend? Well, you spend if you can't, if you it's like the Weimar Republic. If you can't get enough of your paid one day, it's not enough to buy your groceries at the end of the week, you're going to use something else. And even though in the West we all like to hodl our Bitcoin if we have any, because, you know, my sister there with her, she's now up to 300 euros worth of Bitcoin, which is very exciting because you only put 50 in the start, you know. But it's a different mindset, you know. And I think, and there are other tokens as well, which provide an easier function. You know, the other ones that you can spend more easily, and of course stablecoins are great. It's very, very handy, and it's making a fortune for the stablecoin issuers. But it's but that makes more sense than having to, because no one wants to watch their money go up and go down. You know, that's their spending money, their salary. They don't want that.
No.
So stablecoins
even if, like, what the last retrace of Bitcoin was from 107-ish to like 79k. Even that, like, drop is not, and obviously it happened over the course of a few weeks. It wasn't like that instant. I mean, obviously it was shocking when it happened, as it always is.
Yep.
You know, even that is probably not the same amount of value that someone in Venezuela has lost in a week with their currency.
Yeah.
And so, yes.
And so relative, you might only give a $5, but that $5 pays your rent and that buys your food. Then you know, it's that's important to you. It's like when I was very broke, you know, I was on the dole for 3 years and I had 2 kids. And there were a number of times when I got to the end of the grocery shopping and I didn't have enough money. Whoops. Mortification for my teenage children. I was like, Mom, you know, well, just take some stuff out. You know, we don't need that. We'll go on. And it was small money, small change, but it was big for me at the time. So everything's kind of relative, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and it's important, like, to think about money from that perspective as well, that, you know, you really want to do what you can to counteract the effects of inflation. And there are many factors, you know, that are kind of out of control of our government, for example, but there is a lot that our governments across the world are doing that are kind of enabling it to a point. You know, we live in a system where we are encouraging to have 2% inflation per year because that's good. And you're like, okay, so you're encouraging the devaluation of, you know, people's savings, essentially.
Yes.
And you know, we all know the reality of that is, it's always, you know, whatever the figure is that year, it's always been a lot more. Just the cost of cars, for example, the same car we bought 4 years ago is now worth, the exact same car model, everything, obviously a new version, is worth like £10,000 more. And you're like,
wow,
it's just crazy. And it's multifactorial. It's not just obviously straight inflation from here. But yeah, it's just crazy when people, you know, we're encouraged to save, as a society. You know, like if you want to be smart with money, the best thing you can do is save it away for whatever reason. And I think financial education is a thing that we lack in in the UK. But
no, I would imagine here in Ireland is what I imagine across Europe.
Yeah,
people are not taught how to cook, how to do the taxes, and how to, the financial illiteracy. Something. In fact, it possibly happens more in developing countries because they have to. I'm just thinking, gosh, you need to be an arbitrage expert and a trader if you're going to trade from your local currency into dollars and then to buy something and then back again. There's a lot of moving parts there that your average kid in Dublin wouldn't understand.
Yeah, no, and it's true. It's true. And I think it's one of those things, when you go back to school and you're like, these are the sort of things they probably should be teaching on some level to give people an understanding, but maybe, I don't know, into how conspiratorial.
Yeah, but you don't even need to have experts, because the things that need to be taught by the teachers, I'm not blaming the teachers, but society prescribing this, we all do it. We all do our taxes. We all do have our banking accounts. We all cook to better and lesser degrees, obviously. But, so it's not even like they need to get specially trained teachers in there. They can do it from their own staff. And again, this is society, I'm giving out about, not teachers. But yeah, those are some basic things that should be in place. Driving a car, that should be part. I know there's a small module. We have a TY system here, which is between the leaving cert and the final, the inter-cert and the leaving cert. And there's the TY that they encourage kids to try different things and set up mini businesses and do all, travel and a lot of different things. And there is this module there where they go to the driving school where they do, I think, an afternoon. The kids should be taught to drive. Do you know what I mean? That's a primary requisite. Or, well, actually, hang on, tell a lie. You live in a city, you might need to do that. You've got good public transport.
True.
Yeah. So sorry, I take that away.
But I mean, it's well, I you say that. I mean, London's great for public transport, as I'm sure you're aware. But
you used to live there, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think many other UK cities have a good, as good a network in terms of. I used to live in Liverpool and in Bristol, and they have good buses and things, but I don't think the kind of public network, public infrastructure is as good as it is in London with the underground, and because you got underground trains, buses, a real big infrastructure there.
What's interesting? I think that modern kids, the Gen Z, whatever they're called, fractional ownership of private vehicles or bikes for that matter. So it's still need to be able to drive, but they're maybe not owning a car, because a car is an asset that sits either in front of your house or at your work for most of the day. So you're not sweating that asset at all. We've been sold this thing. We have to buy our cars and own our cars. So I think a lot of Gen Z just have it on a fractional basis. They hire a car and they drive it for the day they use, and then the rest of the time. So anyway, they still need to learn to drive cars. Except that, is it Waymo? No, Waymo. A friend of mine was in San Francisco.
They've got them in Austin as well, and some other, is it Austin? Maybe it is. Some other cities in the US as well where the driverless taxis, and it's crazy. I think that is where we're going to. No, neither have I. But I think that's probably not now, but in a decade you're probably going to see that in all major cities, and then at that point you're kind of well, depending on the cost, obviously there's a reason people drive, because it's more cost effective to own your own car and drive. There will be a point. I don't think it's more cost effective. I think it's more convenient. Yeah, it's true.
I think a lot of times where it's an asset that you pay a lot for to sit in front of your house or in front of your office, and you probably, but then it's handy. You can go straight from your house to where you want to go. There is that convenient.
It's true. It's very true. But I guess if obviously you have driverless vehicles, that will be, I would argue, probably a lot cheaper than taxis are now. And it would maybe make people really rethink. And it also depends on how much is on the road, right? And I remember Elon Musk was talking about this years ago before, Elon Musk today, let's not talk about that. But his vision for Tesla was that you'd own a Tesla, but your Tesla would go out and be a taxi and earn you revenue.
Yes. Yeah. I've heard that type of.
Yeah. So, which I thought was a quite interesting idea.
It's actually earning money and paying for itself. Yeah. Yeah, that would make sense as well.
If
cars,
who knows? But then, and then you might not even need to have a car, and then you'll be like, if you do have a car, it's an asset that earns you revenue.
Yeah.
And if you don't have it, well then it's fine.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm not even mad in cars. Why are we talking about cars?
I know, neither am
I'm
I.
having a golf, a very old golf, an '07 golf. But anyway, that he does the job.
It
So
does.
it's
It does. We
cool.
need to do.
I was going to ask you
Yeah, go
another
for it.
question, actually. Going to ask or talk about something else, actually, that I really want to talk about, going back more into Web3 and AI and so that. Have you heard of digital twins?
As in, no, go for it. So,
As you know, hey, so it's really interesting. There's a company called Sensei.io, and they're one of the four leaders in the area. The chap, I've interviewed him now a couple of times, Dan Thompson, who is the CEO. And they are developing digital twins that work 24/7 if you don't have to. And you train your digital twins. So it's not your digital, the digital twins, you think about factories have digital twins and on a computer or whatever. It's where you train your replica to become like an AI brain and to become an extension of, you train it, you put in content, you put in prompts about how you should react. And Dan Thompson, who runs this company, he has a Dan bot in his Telegram channels. And you know how Web3, if you're a CEO or whatever, people still expect you to talk to them. Whereas in Web2, you don't expect to talk to the head of Pepsi. But in Web3, you do. You expect to have access to these guys. So his bot, his Dan bot, will often answer loads of questions like, that people come in and say, oh, this is a great project. When did you set up? What? Oh, the bot knows all the answers. It doesn't need to be him doing it. And it's a phenomenal thing. And I was reading an article for Cointelegraph. I interviewed a couple of other people too as well. Twin Protocol, they're one of the founders from Singularity is in there. And then also in Korea, they have like bots where when you die or before you die, presumably, you do video capture of a loved one. And then they can talk like a deep fake, but they can talk. But you can ask granddad questions and stuff like that. Granddad, before in your time, what was, and the granddad can answer. He said, anyways, this is all this amazing stuff. And it really got me excited. And there was the reason for this story, the purpose of it. And there was a competition with RTE Radio, which is the premier radio station here. And it was a series, it was called The Prompt. And you had to fill in the prompt and write a short piece on it. And one of the ones was A World Without. I think when the writer put it up, I think she intended people to say a world without, culture, a world without, and looking at things that the world needed. And I went, oop, a world without me is now impossible. So as in, if I create my digital twin, it'll always be there. And I can leave instructions. I mean, this is here now, right? This is not future stuff. It's here now. I was going, you could even leave it open if you wanted to let it learn, continue to learn and grow over the years. So my great-great-great-grandchildren, I don't have any grandchildren, but my great-great-grandchildren, if I had any, could ask me questions and could find out what I was thinking and stuff like that. And it blew my mind. And then what I did was, I got all excited about this, what technology and Web3. I had a short story that I'd written a number of years ago, sci-fi short story. And it was accepted into an anthology there. It's over Christmas, competitive anthology in Web3. It was interesting. But when I did all that digital twin stuff, I rewrote the short story into a novella because I changed the end, using tech to change the end. I was thinking of a very famous scene in Blade Runner. You know in Blade Runner where the guy goes, I've witnessed a million things and, star clouds exploding. And when you kill me, I'm gone. That's it. But of course, with a digital twin, it's not gone. So that was inspiring me. I thought, oh my God. So I rewrote my novella. And now this is going back again into Web3. And I'm going to publish it on a site called book.io. Have you heard of book.io?
No, I haven't. Check it out.
Okay, it's the founders, they did it in the Cardano ecosystem. But it'll be chain agnostic as it goes on. But basically the idea is that when you publish your book there, you do it as an NFT. You also use the NFT ideas of different scarcity of covers and stuff like that. And the book is the same, but the covers will be different. And people who buy it, then they can, if they want to, resell the book, the digital book on a secondary marketplace on the .io, sorry. And they can, what happens with that? So normally when you buy a book, from Amazon, a digital book, that's it. You can't resell it.
No. And I mean, they have the authority to revoke you from owning it as well. They have the authority to take it away from you.
Yeah.
Which is
crazy. You don't actually own it. Whereas this, as an NFT, you do own it. And if you sell it, two things happen. You can make money. If you've read the book, you can sell it. And secondly, the original author gets the secondary royalties from the NFTs. So I'm doing that now. And I mentioned earlier Charles Hoskinson, who's the founder of Cardano. And I met him in Denver just recently at East Denver? I met him at Consensus, sorry, in Toronto, in Toronto. And he's a lover of sci-fi. So he's promised to read my book and to promote it.
That's awesome.
Because he's an investor. in book.io. But anyway, so the reason why I brought that story in is just I'm very excited by it at the moment because people say, actually, I'm writing a piece for the Irish Times about AI and how, is it dangerous for artists and stuff like that, because it's going to take away your jobs and everything. I don't think so. I think that you can look at AI and Web3 and all the things that are in this little space. And I love the fact that I've been inspired to write this novella. I'm going to sell it as an NFT. And if, and I haven't written in the last 10 years, not creatively. I write all the time as a journalist, but not creatively. So that's very exciting where technology can actually bring you places. And I think some people say oh, technology is going to kill, AI is going to kill the world. But we said that about the television. We said that about the car.
Yeah, and television was going to kill the radio. That.
And it was even a funny story. Someone said to me, with the wheels on luggage trolleys on luggage. Apparently, when that first came in certain places, I don't know where, maybe it was in India, the unions to kick up a riot. They said, "Oh no, we can't. You lose all the jobs for the porters." They had to take all the wheels off the suitcases for a period. Now, obviously, it's you can't stop progress. But it's interesting that literally, I'm writing this piece for the Irish Times about how is it damaging. I'm kind of going, not if you look at it in the right way. It's exciting. Anyway, sorry, that's my little side segue story into why I'm all excited about AI and selling my books on book.io.
But I think that's also everyone saw the last, and that's another thing. NFTs haven't really taken off this time around. So that's why I also think that my opinion is, maybe it's a hope rather than an opinion, is that we're still early this bull run, and that's why we haven't seen the movement. But anyway, going back to that, that's really the true kind of underlying strong use case for things like NFTs is the following and tracing royalties, where you obviously can sell it on, and the original artist can still make money from it. And that's fascinating. And I think that is a really, really good use case for NFTs, as I think we're trying to navigate. There's something there, and we're how can we make it work? And I also think in terms of I've thought about this a lot in sort of out there ideas, but kind of going back to property, right? Let's say if you have a land deed with an NFT, right? And if someone buys it, maybe there's a royalty that the builder can still get something from when it's sold on.
Interesting. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I think there really is something there, where we're still very, very early in that side of the space, and we're going to see big strides in the future, hopefully.
Well, I love it. I said earlier that I love the fact that there's a do-good element to this space, but I love the fact that we're rethinking stuff. That's phenomenal. Where things that have always been that way. Why? Women don't vote. I mean, if you think about it, 100 years ago, women didn't vote because women can't vote. Now we're going, are you crazy or what? But 100 years ago, that was accepted logic and sense, and societal agreed to it. And then I think what's interesting too as well with the crypto side of things, which if you have a passion for something, there's all these alt projects, whatever, you can make money from your passion and from your tribe, and with your tribe, not from your tribe, with your tribe. Now, isn't that interesting? So let's just say, I mean, everybody wants to, I don't know, write books, for example, and they want to sell books in the community. And rather than using fiat, they use, in this case, the book.io, it's ADA. But it's not fascinating that you could actually have a passion for something, and that translates into actual things that are valuable that you can then use to buy things and pay your rent or pay your mortgage. I mean, that's and it gives power to ordinary folk who have a passion. You don't have to be like a king or a billionaire like Musk, who self-made billionaire, but sure, he inherited a lot from his dad. So there's a lot of I mean, I don't particularly like the man, but he started up here.
He definitely had a leg up.
He did. Yeah. So I do like the idea. Well, mind you, I was education in Trinity College Dublin. I recognise that's a huge privilege that other kids who grew up in Nigeria don't have that. That's not the same thing. But I love the fact that you can be passionate about something in this space, and you can build something, whether it's clean water, planting trees, creating driverless cars, whatever it is. You can actually make money from thin air almost, from your passion. That's exciting.
Yeah, definitely, and definitely. I like the concept when you're saying, building with your peers. So not from them, but with them together.
Because the whole dog eat dog thing, that's so last century. And I like the fact that it's not a zero-sum game. If I want to succeed, of course I do, but I want you to succeed. And if I succeed, I don't want to do it at the expense of you or your children, your future children. I want us, hard work and ideas and innovation and, really enjoying yourself, go out there and do your stuff and be successful. And I don't think there's this notion from the last century that to be successful, you really had to kill somebody else, really was at someone else's expense. And that is so nasty. Whereas if you are a tribe, like, how the Mormons build houses, well, allegedly, you see that film.
Yeah.
Cool. But I think there is a degree of that. And back in the day, villages used to help each other a lot more. People, especially in rural areas, so they come together at harvest and stuff like that. And that's lovely. And that's not about being rich. It's about helping your neighbors and doing good things. And maybe tech can bring us back to that. But my neighbor might be someone in Switzerland as opposed to down the road here in Wicklow in Ireland where I live. So that's kind of interesting. Maybe tech can bring back culture.
Yeah, no, I think that is, and hopefully it can, because I think we are kind of becoming very insular as a society, or have been for quite a while, a few decades now, and detaching ourselves from our community. It's not really a thing that people do these days as much, and it might not be that it's your immediate community, but hey, actually you're finding your tribe, your community in a wider space, because there are people that, maybe someone next door doesn't agree with, not disagree, but maybe just isn't really into the sort of things you are. But hey, there's this person over, like you say, in Switzerland that, thinks very much like I do, and we can work on something together. Or, we both invest into this project because we both believe in this project, and then we meet each other because we communicate via, I don't know, the Telegram chat or something in that project. And so I think that's a really
it does. It opens outlook. The world, and it might be an antidote. You're right to you see all the studies now that children, young people are they're more isolated. They tend to they don't drink as much. They don't have as much sex. And they don't get out as much. And that's not really good for mankind. You want to the drinking, that's a positive bit. But the other stuff, that's social activities that aren't happening anymore. That's not so good. So but maybe tech like Web3 tech can maybe change it a bit. It's not all tech is obviously neutral. There's nothing good or bad about tech. This is a bomb, perhaps, but maybe and also because community is so valued in this space, maybe that's where people who don't necessarily understand or agree with their neighbors, as you said, but there's something else that they go, oh, we're committed over. It could be a game, could be a passion, a book, buy my books.
Yeah, well, you're saying obviously you said over you had 18 books published. That's amazing. Very, very well done. Like, kudos.
Well, all self-published. Anyone could do that. Yeah. A lot of them were, back in the day, I wrote blogs. Like one was called Diary of a Bankrupt. So the day I started bankruptcy, I wrote a blog every week, I think it was. But I turned it into a book at the end because, oh my God, going through highs and lows and highs and lows and highs and lows, and then coming out at the far end, I was included the European parliamentary run, which was just mind-blowing. For someone who's never run an election before, it was crazy. And it was just, anyway, so some of it it's naturally from my writing, and some of it's creative. But then again, this book that I've just written, Daria's Delightful Dancing Emporium, that's creative. That's like exciting. So I want to do more. I want to be like where I'm at in my life now. I hit a big birthday there this year, and I really, really want to do more creative writing. That's something that excites me, as you can tell. That's what I'm telling you about mine.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough, and that's really cool. And then I guess is it out yet, or?
Very soon. It's I'm chasing Sheila, who's the CMO at Book.io, to find out the timing, because I'd say Charles did say he'd help promote it. Well, he's a busy man. I won't hold him to it, except he did say it. And it'll be this month, because actually I'm speaking at a local festival, arts festival, next month, and I'm going to talk about it's a kind of a book launch that I'm going to be doing, but it'll also be a 101 on what is crypto, what is blockchain, what are NFTs, so it's all that tell us what are digital twins. So it's kind of a book launch and also a 101 on Web3. So a little country arts festival. That'll
nice.
Be fun.
That's cool though. That's really cool, and I'm glad that
I might have one person in the audience.
It's all right, it has to start somewhere, and you're tapping into that sort of like community. But that's interesting. I never would have thought ever there'd be someone to talk at a kind of like a festival like that, and that's great about Web3, obviously.
Yeah. What do you know what it is? It's like they always say, the experts say, if you want to be who you are, be it. Do you know what I mean? Don't wait for it. Be it now. So I was thinking about that because I'm a journalist now. I do a lot of journalism, which I really enjoy. I love that. But being the author thing, I thought, right, I'm going to book myself in. So as I say, I'm writing a piece of the Irish Times. I'm squeezing myself in there, and I'm applying to other festivals as well. And I said, can I come and give a talk about Web3 and do my book launch? At the same time. So I am being the author. And that's kind of fun. That's kind of,
That's awesome.
Be the person I want to be.
No, that's really cool. I think, well, thank you very much, Jill, I think it's now a good time to wrap up. I don't want to give you too long because we've been chatting for an hour. And then I think if you're open to it, have another discussion again another time soon, because obviously I want to dive into one of the things that was at Liberland. That's very interesting.
Liberland, yeah. I was first female congresswoman elected. Yeah, that was exciting.
Yeah, that's really cool. And but thank you very much for your time. Very much appreciate it. And if anyone wants to find you, where do they kind of find your socials and things?
Where's the best place to find you? LinkedIn. LinkedIn is definitely the easiest because it's like, and Twitter, so an X, the other two. So that's my name. So it's Jillian Godsil, Jillian with a J and Godsil with a G. Because if it's Jillian with a G, I'd be a GG, I'd be a horse. Don't want to be that. So Jillian Godsil is, and actually because even though I'm in Web3, because I'm a journalist, if you search for my name, it pops up whatever socials I have.
Cool. Thank you very much, Jillian. Really appreciate it. And hopefully get you back on again soon. So I'm gonna.
Thank you very much. That's super.